Welcome to Charity Therapy, the podcast where we explore the ups and downs of the nonprofit sector and answer your burning questions. I'm your host, Jess Birkin, owner of Birkin Law Office, and I'm excited you're here. Imagine hanging out with me and my super smart, funny nonprofit expert pals. You get to ask them anything about your nitty-gritty nonprofit life and get their wisdom for free. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just strapping on your nonprofit boots, we're here to share stories and remind you you're not alone on this journey. So get ready to join the conversation and bring me the tough questions. I ain't scared. Ready to rock? Let's dive in. Hey, hello there. How are you? Welcome.
Hey, Jess. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all getting settled in and comfy for this another episode of Charity Therapy. Although I'm always like doing the dishes or driving or something, actually. So I don't know what you're doing while you listen to podcasts.
When you're listening to a podcast?
Yeah, for sure.
Man, I'm like legit doing anything. I'm possibly going to sleep. I'm in my car. I could be getting ready in my bathroom. I pretty much have like a podcast going all the time.
Who needs an inner monologue when you can have someone in your ear every waking hour?
That is the point of the podcast, isn't it? To stifle the inner monologue. Shut up. I'm going to listen to a podcast now.
Shut up, that anxiety conga line that's just going through. And
anxiety conga line. That's a good title right there.
There you go. All right, let's jump in. Today, we're talking about everyone's favorite overloaded, understaffed, bureaucratic behemoth, the IRS. Pew, 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 pew.
Anxiety conga line.
I feel like we're always joking about how the IRS is this like soulless, soul-crushing black hole. But as I'm saying this, I'm like flashing back a couple years ago. Jess, do you remember Diana?
Oh, Diana, the one and only.
I know, right? I know. I feel like whenever I think about the IRS being terrible, I just picture Diana. And I feel like we should tell the listeners about Diana because we can remember the few bright spots within the IRS.
I mean, so like, I don't know how many people have actually tried to call the IRS before.
Hopefully not many.
Probably not ever. And also, like, I promise this episode is not going to be all about just like IRS regs, but it is like a total legit nightmare to call the IRS, especially since 2020, because the phones were like constantly jammed. And so even on like a good year, you're on hold forever. And then when you finally get on with a human being, it's like playing this really unfortunate version of 20 questions. But like they're just trying to not help you. Like you have been on those calls, like people who are just like, your power of attorney is not on file or like whatever. They just always seem to have some reason that they can't talk to you after you just spent 2 hours on hold. But there was this one lady, Diana, where I was like trying to help a client. I don't even remember what client this was for, and we can't say it anyway. But it was like during the pandemic, and it just wasn't a good time to be contacting the IRS or having any sort of problem in general, let alone with the IRS. So normally you just like go into like phone tree hell or faxing back and forth. But Diana actually called me back. Like a human from the IRS called me and she was helpful and she answered my questions and like we strategized together about how to like resolve the problem. And it just totally restored my faith in humanity.
Right? It's possible that there are real human beings at the IRS and they're not just like the human embodiment of like, actually the entire time. So yeah. Anyways, I thought that was a good backdrop for this episode because I mean, this question isn't about the humans at the IRS. It's actually about the robots, but there are humans there.
There are humans there. Once in a great while, you get to talk to one.
Anyways, are you ready for our listener question, Jess? Okay.
Let's do it. Bring it.
All right. I am the executive director of a small nonprofit. We were chugging along, filing our 990N for a few years, and then we got some big government grants that forced us to grow really quickly. I've been trying to get my arms around all the compliance, and I noticed that the IRS doesn't show our last two 990s on their exempt entity search page for us online. I know that we filed them. I'll admit they were filed late, but they were done by a CPA since we had to do a full Form 990 and get audited and the whole 9 yards. Why aren't they showing up in the public search? Our CPA firm swears they were filed and received, so we shouldn't worry so much. But I'm still nervous because I don't have any paperwork to show it. What gives?
There is like no reason for me to say this other than I've just worked with too many people over the years.
Yep.
Ain't no way they filed these. Also, ain't no way they got audited. No, ain't no way.
Yep.
They were going from 990N to so much money we have to get an audit. I think maybe that means something else. Even if they did get audited, I'm just going to go out and say, like, I don't think they know what an audit is.
Yeah, something seems fishy.
Yeah, or like they had to do like a checklist or something like that. Like we work with a lot of groups that get like audited, but it's not like consolidated financial statements and like an audit letter.
Yep.
I know we filed them. Do you know that they were filed? Because you're also saying you didn't get any paperwork, which means you didn't sign anything.
Yeah.
Because your accountant doesn't just submit stuff without you looking at it. And usually you have like a board meeting where maybe your CPA comes and explains what's going on this heinous document so that the board had some sort of explanation of what it was before they approved it for filing. So like the fact that you don't have any paperwork to show it, to me, that combined with they were a 990N filer, which is just like a few clicks of the mouse and they don't have to have real accounting. They're saying they're nervous because they don't have paperwork. I'm nervous that you never even provided the information to your accountant to do anything.
Yep.
Like you think that it was handled, and I cannot stress enough how many times I talk to people where they think it was handled by the executive director, by the board finance person, by Uncle Larry, the accountant that they're friends with, who said that they would take care of it for them.
Yep.
And guess what? It didn't get done.
Yep.
And oftentimes, in my experience, what shows up is a string of emails between the daughter-in-law, who's a CPA, who's going to do this for them as a volunteer, and the treasurer going back and forth saying, if you want me to do your 990, I need all your financial information. And that just goes nowhere for about 6 months. And then the CPA gets busy. And since this isn't like a paid client or it's not their main bread and butter, that just drops off their desk.
Yep.
So I would be very nervous that actually nothing was filed for 2 years and they're about to be auto revoked, because nonprofits, you cannot file your tax form, your 990s, your tax form. You cannot file that for like 2 years in a row. And there's no harm, no foul, really. But on the third year, they just yank your C3 status. And it's not a human. There's no Diana who's like the evil Diana who's being mean and doing this to you. There is just a robot. It's an algorithm. It just looks at their database. It says no tax filing, no tax filing. And it's the second that third no tax filing shows up, it's just like, poof, C3 gone.
Yep.
C3 gone. Sorry.
And you know it's automatic because we heard from a lot of people during the pandemic where they were behind on their 990s and they filed their last one by mail and it did get sent, but it was just like sitting in these piles of mail the IRS was super behind on opening. And in the meantime, their revocation went through because the IRS didn't know that they had a filed 990 in the pile of mail and they're not going to check it. It's automatic.
Which is the case for do not ever send anything by mail unless the IRS specifically instructs that you must send it by mail. If you can electronically file, which you can for 990, you need to do that. Because I want to say there's some news story recently about the IRS, like just basically shredded 30 bazillion documents. And they were just like, well, we'll solve our backlog by just destroying everything. No, literally, it's not like that's an Onion headline.
I know.
It's a real thing.
You know it's good when the news headlines and the Onion headlines blurring.
Yeah, blend together.
Yep.
So what I would say to this person is you may be screwed. You should not assume. You should reach out to that accountant and say, hello, I am under the assumption that you filed these 990s. Could you please provide copies of what was filed and proof of filing with the IRS, whether that is a tracking number that shows delivery at the Ogden office or wherever it went, or whether that is the e-filed confirmation page from the internet. You need actual proof, because it is possible that their database is somehow not keeping up with whatever, but you're potentially about to be revoked. And so you need to absolutely know 100% for sure, with proof or with a sworn statement from your accountant that they did it and somehow didn't retain copies, which in that case, you need a new accountant. Figure it out, because if not, you have to file something right now. You need to file, even if it's wrong and you need to amend, file something. You don't say when your tax year is ending, but when that third 990 is due and it's not submitted, you done. And then you be calling me for reapplication.
Yeah. So you say file something now. And like you said earlier, not by mail. We need to do this online for this one. And what does that look like if they file something that isn't correct? Say they have a week before their due date and they're like, oh gosh, we just need to get something in, and they file something. What would they then need to do to make sure everything is in good graces going forward?
Well, worst case scenario is, my guess is they're not using accounting software.
Right.
So they probably don't have a general ledger. They might be using an Excel sheet to manage their financials. If they're in the boat of oh, actually, we never provided anything to the accountant because it was so hard to get organized, that's the worst case scenario, that they really just don't even know what they have or what they don't have. Or it's really hard to match things up to those IRS categories when you're not keeping track of it in a way that reports out so that you can do your 990.
Yeah.
So the first step is to get somebody to set up your books who knows what the heck they're doing with nonprofit accounting.
Yep.
Make sure your general ledger is clean. Make sure you are doing things well. Hire someone with nonprofit experience. If you need a referral, you can email us.
Yep.
And then get something filed. And I'm not going to give tax advice. I don't know exactly what you would put on the 990 that's, probably wrong. I would ask your CPA or your accountant, not your bookkeeper, but the person who's going to do the tax filing. But you need to go out and hire that person. And if that's the same person you were working with before, that's great. But I would say you get what you pay for. And so if you want this to be done right, you should hire somebody who really knows what they're doing with nonprofits, isn't just trying to do you a favor, and just get some professional advice about how to move this forward.
Right.
It also kind of depends on how much time they have left to file, because if they still have 4 or 5 months, you could get it together and file a solid, correct form, right?
Yeah. Yep. And we've seen this happen before too, where, folks are working with CPAs. Not even your uncle was a retired CPA and he's helping you out. Not even a true pro bono favor kind of situation, but they did hire someone in their town because it's the only CPA in their town. And they don't know nonprofits, but they're doing their best in this situation. And it's it feels like you hired a professional because you did, but they may have thought they could hack it and figure it out for you, but it's really up to you to hire the person that can do the job. And it may not be the first person that is accessible to for a CPA.
And they don't have to be in your town.
No.
That's the thing, right? Just I don't have to be in your town to give you some advice about your nonprofit. Doctors, lawyers, accountants, they have specialties. They have things that they do. You wouldn't go to your dermatologist and ask them for advice about your heart.
Yep.
Because that's not the kind of doctor they are. And accountants, they do public accounting. That means they're largely working with individual taxpayers, or they do business accounting. You need to like find an accounting firm that has enough staff that they've got somebody that like, they're like, oh yeah, the nonprofit stuff, like Jane does that, you know?
Yep.
Just find somebody who gets it. Especially this particular organization says they're taking government grants. And big, I mean, what is big to them? I don't know. But government grants, that is not to be trifled with.
Yeah.
If it's federal money, like they don't care if you're off by a nickel or $1 million. It's a material problem.
Yep.
State grants, it's theoretically the same standard. I just don't think they enforce it as well.
Theoretically.
Depending on the state and the agency. I mean, feeding our future. Hey,
Yeah,
you know,
I was right here in our
states.
backyard. Yep.
States. They're overloaded.
Yep.
They're overloaded, to be fair. But, you know, you want to have somebody who knows what they're doing if you are taking government money.
Yep.
I mean, if you're taking any money, really, you want to know what you're doing.
Yep.
But like, especially if you're agreeing to all these extra compliance things that, you know, you probably signed off on, you just didn't realize.
Yep. Well, and we've seen this happen over and over again where you get so excited about like, hey, we have been chugging along with, you know, $30,000 each year in our annual revenue. And then all of a sudden it's going to triple because we have this amazing grant and suddenly we're going to be making so much more than triple. You know, sometimes you find these tiny organizations that are suddenly like, in the course of 2 years are making over $1 million. And it's just like, okay, great. But now your life has gotten way more complicated.
Actually not great. Because to go from tiny to, I mean, just think about the people that we have helped.
Yeah.
Where it'd be like if you picture a kid who grew 6 inches in a week.
Right.
Just imagine how excruciating that would be in your body. Like your bones, your muscles, everything is stretched and not like it just hurts. That's what happens with a nonprofit that all of a sudden gets a big infusion of money and they aren't prepared for it. They don't have staff for it. They don't have their accounting figured out. They don't have processes figured out. They've been kind of just noodling along. The board's been a working board, not a governing. I mean, there's just so many growing pains that go with that. It's like, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Right.
You want to have a nice, steady growth trajectory. If you're going from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, you better get your cabinet of professionals around you to help you because it's going to be painful and you need the morphine.
Exactly.
Or whatever.
It's going to be painful even with the professionals. So can you imagine doing it by yourself and as you are like uncovering problems down the line, it's just going to be, you know, that's the kind of stuff that can sink a nonprofit too.
100%.
It's like you don't realize that the good thing of getting more money can be just as problematic as not having enough money.
Yep.
If you're not prepared.
I mean, you can really hug a nonprofit to death.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, well.
All right, I have some takeaways for you. First, I will just say hire people who know nonprofits. It's really important that you do things right, and you don't know everything about nonprofits, and that's okay. So you hire professionals who do know how to manage things at a nonprofit, whether that's your bookkeeper, your CPA, your lawyer, whoever. Surround yourself with the people who know what they're doing. Another one I think that's important is even when you have hired professionals, remember that your filings, your compliance, all of that kind of stuff is ultimately your responsibility as the board member, the executive director, whatever. It's not just, oh, we hired a CPA, I'm sure it was handled. Like it's your responsibility to make sure the things go out. So, you know, that's something you have to keep your eye on. And the last big one I want to say is that growing pains are real and the like explosion in growth is not always a good thing. And you need to consider whether taking big government grants or things like that is something that's actually good for the nonprofit right now and will help serve your mission in the long run. Or maybe you should take a couple years to get your infrastructure in place. So you got to think about that when growing.
Or at least budget for the cost of the infrastructure. Go in with your eyes wide open, knowing what it's going to look like to your organization to level up your infrastructure that way.
Absolutely. Jess, do you have any other takeaways you want to add on?
No, I think those are the ones.
Awesome.
Fabulous.
Fabulous.
Meghan, thanks for being here, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, you non-IRS having to call humans, I need you to do me a huge favor and share this podcast with somebody who's experienced nonprofit pain and needs to hear about our anxiety conga line experiences. Rate, give it a 5-star.
We'd love you forever.
If it's a 3-star, you should email me and tell me why so we can work on it. You know, go to your podcast tab and leave us a 5-star review. It really does help us out. If you have questions, if you have a story to share, if you ever met a good or evil Diana at the IRS, I want to know about it. So send me a note online, leave a voice memo, call 612-208-9120. And as always, thanks for listening.
Bye.